So I have already given you the topic for the group discussion, and that topic is quite important topic. And as you know, there is a crisis going on in Sri Lanka as an island country, and that crisis now is become humanitarian crisis. Earlier it was, political crisis, and then economic crisis, and now it is humanitarian crisis. So we should discuss something about this particular topic, and question can be asked in different ways, and I've already supplied you a couple of videos which you have to listen, and you have to make your short notes for this particular topic, and you have to give your own opinion. So let me give you the name of the topic, and then I'll come to each one of you and you will introduce the topic. You will speak a couple of lines about the topic, and then I'll open the house for discussion and you can discuss. Okay, so topic is very generic. I'm giving you the topic is the Sri Lankan crisis. That is a topic. So GD topic is Sri Lankan crisis. Now it is open to you to whatever direction you want to take, but the topic is Sri Lankan crisis.
So should I introduce the topic?
I'll give chance to each one. So I'll give 1 minute and then we start. Sri Lankan crisis is the name of the topic. Okay, Pratik, so I think you can start now.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, friends. My name is Pratik Navalvirk. It's my pleasure to introduce the topic, the Sri Lankan crisis. I believe this topic is of vital importance, especially in the globalized economic order. And it has lessons on how to not manage your economy, and at the same time, the significance of the geopolitics of economic relations. I believe the topic can be divided into 5 limbs. Number 1, what is the present situation in Sri Lanka? Number 2, what are the factors that led to the crisis? Number 3, what are the challenges that lie ahead of Sri Lanka? Number 4, the opportunities for India in this Sri Lankan crisis. And lastly, what are the remedial measures that can be taken by Sri Lanka to come out of this crisis?
Okay, now Nilendra.
Okay, good evening, friends. My name is Nilendra Pandey, and I'll take this opportunity of introducing today's GD topic to you all, which is Sri Lankan crisis. In my opinion, this is a topic of current relevance, and this topic can give us a lot of lessons that we can learn from it. I have divided this topic into 4 parts. First one is, let us try to find the causes that led to this crisis. The causes can be further subclassified into internal and external factors. The internal factors can contain the political, social, and economical factors, and the external factors can be the Russia-Ukraine war and the debt trap of China. After we find the causes, let us see what are the problems that they are creating in Sri Lanka. It may be the rise of inflation or the unemployment. We can explore that, and after that we can give the solution. That will be the third part. And the fourth part is that what lessons the world and as a country we can take from the Sri Lankan crisis, because intelligent people learn from their own mistakes, but smart people learn from other people's mistakes. So I think if we progress in this manner, we'll have a good discussion. Now I would like to open the house for discussion.
So Bhupender, can you hear me? Okay, Saurabh, can you start?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. I'm sorry. Okay, Bhupendra is online, I think.
Okay, Saurabh, you start and then Bhupender will do.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity to introduce the topic. I believe 2 of our members have already introduced it very well. I would just like to add to that. We also have to analyze the history of Sri Lanka. Like I believe the crisis started way back in 1948 when when Ceylon Citizenship Act was passed, which was explicitly discriminating towards Sri Lankan Tamils. I think from the crisis actually dates back to 1948. We'll have to analyze from that, and going on the civil war, how it occurred, and what all were the outcomes of the civil war, and then we'll come on how Sri Lanka started rebuilding its economy post 2010, and how it fell into a debt trap of China. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Bhupender?
Good evening, friends. I am Bhupender Kumar Lava, and I'm glad to start the discussion. Friends, today the topic given to us is Sri Lankan crisis. The topic is very relevant to the current affairs, and as we all know that right now everyone has heard the news that Sri Lankan president has fled away from Sri Lanka, and that is because the economy over there in Sri Lanka is in really a very bad crisis. What happened? We most of us heard that the Sri Lankan rupee has depreciated very below, and their what is that inflation has risen above 100%. So that is a challenging situation right now in Sri Lanka. And friends, what we can discuss here is that how all this happened, that Sri Lanka got into this crisis situation, what are the challenges in front of Sri Lanka, and how they can manage the situation right now, and how India can help it and impact on India. So I open the discussion, and I invite all of you to participate in the discussion. Let us start.
Okay. So I think everybody has initiated the talk, initiated the discussion, and some of you have given the classification also. So we expect that next discussion of 10 minutes will be in that direction only. So now I open the house for discussion among all of you, and then we can conclude the discussion. So please proceed forward now.
Okay, so friends, I think first of all we should discuss the causes that have led to this crisis. In my opinion, the major causes are due to the political due to the political party and the political scenario that has been there. You know, the government government goes on cutting the taxes, even though the International Monetary Fund advised them to not cut the taxes in spite they asked them to raise it. So just to lure the people to take vote of the people, they sent the whole country into the economic crisis.
I believe that there is more to this than simply populist policies. In order to understand the economic crisis of Sri Lanka, we need to go into a little background. The background of Sri Lankan Civil War. When the Sri Lankan Civil War ended in 2009, Sri Lankan economy at that time was not in a very good situation. At that time, Sri Lanka had taken big amounts of loans from IMF in 2009, and post 2013, its exports had stopped growing and imports have risen very highly.
Okay, Prateek, I would like to correct you here once that from 2006 to 2013, the Sri Lankan
I believe what you are trying to say is the Sri Lankan growth rate was very high, but my argument is not the Sri Lankan growth rate. My argument is that Sri Lanka had taken loads
and
of
after that they
from
did very
IMF
well
in
till
2013. That Sri Lanka had
and
taken
they
loans,
took loans from even
IMF in 2008, as a consequence of which they had a very high external debt in 2008 itself. They had a high growth rate till 2012, so that was not showing in their figures. But once in 2013, the global food prices crashed, and exports stopped growing and imports started increasing. And further in that, we have to understand that what happened was that Sri Lanka engaged in economic mismanagement. As already pointed by Nilendra, they engaged in populist policies, wherein tax cuts was given in 2019. And together with that, there was Easter bombings in 2018, which ruined their tourism sector. And lastly, then there were two major reasons of COVID-19. What COVID-19 did was, A, it crushed their tourism sector. B, it at the same time took away their another source of forex reserves. that is remittances that were sent by Sri Lankan nationals from abroad because of the lockdown that had happened worldwide because of COVID-19. And then, as pointed earlier by Saurabh, the Sinhalese nationalism or the discriminatory policies against the Tamilians and the Mohammedans in Sri Lanka had led to diminishing of democratic institutions, as a consequence of which what had happened was there was big fault lines, and the Rajapaksa brothers, the politics at that time was simply built on Sinhalese nationalism, and nobody was worried about what was actually happening in the economy. And then
okay, I get your point. You're trying to point towards the social issues that took place due to that led to this crisis. But to understand this crisis, this is an economic crisis, and to understand it, let us look at it from an economic perspective. Now, Sri Lanka's GDP depends heavily on two things. One is as it was correctly pointed out by you, it is tourism. 1/10 of the GDP is of tourism, and the second one is agriculture. As you pointed out, due to those blasts on the Easter and due to the COVID, the tourism sector went down. But the second problem was that government tried to bring a policy which tried to
fertilizer
promote
ban.
Fertilizer ban, which tried to promote organic farming, but that was not done in a planned way. So due to that, what happened that the tea and rice that was cultivated in Sri Lanka, which Sri Lanka originally exported, it started importing it, and this led to a very big rise in the internal prices of those commodities in Sri Lanka, which destroyed their agriculture. And this, I think, also is one of the major reasons why this crisis is today there in Sri Lanka.
I agree with you, Nalendra. And together with that, there's a debt trap policy of China.
Yes.
Because
yes.
China gave loans to Sri Lanka in bulks. And at the same time, Sri Lanka invested in those projects which never brought the returns that they were supposedly to bring. One of which was Hanban Tota Port. It never worked as a successful project. And now Sri Lanka finds itself...
It was never meant to, actually.
Huh?
It was never meant to work, actually.
Exactly. It was a debt trap policy, the string of pearls. And as a consequence, Sri Lanka fell into that debt trap. And naturally, because there were no returns, and together, as already pointed by my friend Nalendra, the tourism sector was gone, the agriculture sector was gone, there was no source of revenue, the tax cuts have been imposed, so no internal revenue, no external source of revenue, and naturally the economy went into a crisis, out of which now, as a consequence of which, there are food shortages, essential commodity shortages, hyperinflation, and a political turmoil with the president of Sri Lanka fleeing and then resigning, and total distrust among the public regarding the political system of the Sri Lankan country.
And not just Hanban Tota Port, actually. The political party of Sri Lankans used China's loans to distribute freebies during the elections, to win the elections, basically.
Exactly.
So
that
also, that also stressed the government's budget.
Exactly.
That also deepened the crisis, yes.
Exactly.
And they took loans from the Chinese company at a very high interest rate. And what they did was they gave the contract to the Chinese company itself. So the loan that was given, the money flowed back to China, and they put that money in those projects which did not give them return. The international airport and the Hanban Tota Port that was formed. And now what China has did, this has led to another problem, political problem, that China has taken that port on a lease for 99 years. And there are reports that China may use that port as a naval base. So that is also a geopolitical problem.
That is the point, and you said correctly that they took a lot of wrong decisions, and they keep on making those mistakes again and again, which led to this crisis. And what the Sri Lankan government is doing right now is like there is no power, no control over there. So people are more and more getting like they'll get irritated. They'll do something. There won't be any control.
I believe we have discussed the factors in detail now. Let's move on to the next challenges that currently are there for Sri Lanka in order to come out of this crisis. So I'm going to open the house saying that number one, the major challenge is how to come out of the debt trap. And the second challenge is how to restore the faith of the people in the political process because of the economic turmoil. And in order to understand these two, I believe the role of India becomes important, because we are actually a beneficiary of this crisis, because India can now take back the geopolitical space that it had ceded to to China in Sri Lanka. And I believe India can help Sri Lanka in 4 ways. Number one, India has enough food grains, and they can provide food grains to Sri Lanka. Number two, India can provide them with forex reserves in order to import essential commodities. Number three, India can invest in Sri Lankan infrastructure projects and get back the geopolitical interests, especially in northern part of Sri Lanka. Number four, India can address the long pending Tamilian issue, which is of utmost importance, not only to Indian nationality, especially to the Tamilian sub-regionalism, which has been, because they have been discriminated against, as rightly pointed out by Saurabh, since 1948. So we can address all these issues. And
okay,
lastly,
you told about what India can do to rectify the problems. Now I would like to shift what Sri Lanka can do to rectify its problems itself. The first thing is that they need to reframe the economic policy, and to take decisions there should be a formation of government. So I think there needs to be an immediate formation of government which includes representatives from all parties, which is acceptable to the people, because people are constantly in rebellion there. So first of all, a government should be formed, and it should reform the structure of economic policies, and they should take new decisions to take Sri Lanka out of economic crisis. They can take a bailout package from IMF, or they can consult World Bank or any other organization, and as they advise them, they can proceed in the following manner.
I believe that you are very correct that IMF can offer a bailout package, but the problem with IMF is that IMF has always functioned on neoliberal economics. Yes. As a consequence of which, what they are going to essentially suggest is raising of taxes, cutting of subsidies, and that is going to result in super hyperinflation. So I believe the external aid of countries who provide soft loans to Sri Lanka, that is going to be a better way of bailing out Sri Lanka of this crisis, rather than relying on the Bretton Woods twins, because both of these organizations, they, for example, now they have suggested in Pakistan to increase diesel prices by rupees 50 rupees per liter, and 30 have already been raised. So in total, it is 80 rupees. So in an economy such as Sri Lanka, which is already under hyperinflation, such measures are not going to restore the faith of the people in the political process. Rather, they are going to rebel even more fiercely. So what is essentially needed right now is an external hand which can help Sri Lanka to tide over this crisis, and at the same time, the community fault lines that have been existing since 1948, they can be restored. So at the same time, socially, politically, and economically, a total reparation of Sri Lanka is done. And then finally, they can come out of this crisis in a manner that is both sustainable. And then we can obviously take the monetary policy and fiscal policy conducively in order to conduct them in a manner that is needed in a neoliberalized world.
I agree with you, but there are a lot of crises that is going in the world right now, from Russia-Ukraine war. So it is affecting all over the world. So there will be a question that if you are asking about help from other countries, are other countries in a position to help themselves? Because inflation is a problem for every country. The US is affected by it. The Europe is obviously going through an energy crisis. India can help them, but in a limited manner. So I think better would be a combination of both.
That other countries will help it or not. So what
I
happened is that you see, China, when China gave huge debts to Sri Lanka, so that China somehow can owe that. But what now China is seeking, that China is going to IMF, that Sri Lanka can no more repay his debts. So China is seeking IMF's help that somehow make us repay our debt. So China-like country, when China-like country is not trying to help, so other countries won't be able to help Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is in literally huge crisis, 100% inflation, and you see when 100% inflation is
every crisis there is an opportunity, and I believe for India there is nothing like a Sri Lanka no greater opportunity.
You can say you are right, that
because we need to counter the string of pearls strategy, which is of vital importance, because if the Belt and Road Initiative succeeds, Indian economy can,
Yes.
India will be
Mhm.
surrounded totally by China as a natural consequence, no matter how powerful we become.
What you are saying is
economically.
geopolitically that India must cover Sri Lanka somehow.
Exactly.
But listen,
And also
that,
in accordance with its
see,
neighborhood first policy.
you are right
But
that somehow
Prateek
you
had
are
a very
connecting
good
this to
point earlier
geopolitical, that how
IMF and
China is
Bretton Woods
covering and
have their
how
own
we can
conditions.
come out of that, and we can somehow capture Sri Lanka some part and can make
Not capturing Sri
no,
Lanka's
not
part,
capturing. I'm saying that
winning the goodwill back of the people of Sri Lanka, so that we can finally have a neighbor who is at peace with us. Because currently Pakistan, Nepal, both of these countries, which especially Nepal, which was traditionally an Indian partner, has fallen into the lap of China. So for us, it is essential to not commit the mistakes that we have committed in the 1960s and to take the benefit of this crisis. And as far as economically it is concerned, we can capture the markets of Europe,
I think
Iran, Iraq, of which were traditionally Sri Lankan markets of tea as well as apparel. So we can do that. At the same time, we can help Sri Lanka. So we are helping both.
Yeah, we are
ourselves as
helping
well
Sri
as
Lanka,
I
and
think
India is already told
we are
that
moving
1.5
away from the
billion,
discussion
they are
idea.
about to
India is
give,
already
like,
helping
food
Sri
banks
Lanka.
are
It is
also
giving petrol through
giving.
Lanka. IOC and
Yeah,
HPCL is already
it is
refueling the
all
jets of
already.
But
Sri
I
Lanka.
feel we have
But India
digressed
cannot
from the
help Sri
topic.
Lanka to a large extent because there is a population who does not. There are a group of population who will not like help of India. So that exists in every country. So
So
India can
logically,
only
if we look
enter
at
it
this,
till a small extent only.
right?
But I believe
Like
let's come back to the topic, which was Sri Lankan crisis. So the
Yes,
remedies that
exactly.
we are
moving away
exactly
from the
there.
we have
topic.
to
That
come
how
to the
can
remedies,
we,
which, as
how
Narendra
can Sri
pointed,
Lanka
what
come
Sri
out of
Lanka can
that?
do.
And
What Sri Lanka can
like,
do. Sri Lanka can essentially go for a debt restructuring from
first of all,
the
what Sri Lanka can do is that, like,
debt
it needs
restructuring.
foreign refunds, foreign exchange it requires. So it must somehow make sure that exports are good. And for exports, it largely depends on tea. So tea and stuff like this. So what they must do is that they must improve their farming, the organic farming which they
Revival of
introduce
agriculture.
back there. They must remove that, and they must somehow bring fertilizers in. They must grow the like, they must grow farms
I
so
agree with you,
quickly that they
Bhupinder.
can
I agree with you, Bhupinder,
make
that
exports.
agriculture is going to help. But currently, for the first thing they need to do is that, so that they do not default on any loan, they need to undergo a debt restructuring program so that their
Yes,
debt is spread
Agriculture
over a
is more
long
of a
period of
mid-
their
time.
debt has
Then they
already,
can
like,
start
they
rebuilding
cannot
the
even
Exactly.
economy.
pay
Short-term major would be
Agricultural,
interest
short-term would be debt
industrial,
right
restructuring,
now.
as
So
tertiary
Sachin
sector,
somebody
and even
needs
the
to
tourism
come up
sector.
and like, give them a huge loan so that they can first pay their interest. So they need some sort of money from somewhere, some debt.
And
Like IMF
recently,
has
G20 has
already
also
removed.
advocated that Sri Lanka should be given some extra time to repay the loans, as it has so much debt that it cannot be paid instantly. And the
Even
other
they
thing
are
that
not
they
able
can
to
do is
pay
that
interest
It
rates.
has
their
to
mainly
be there.
GDP
It has to be there.
was on tea and agriculture. So one thing in the long term they can do is that diversify your GDP and diversify your business instead of
And
depending
they
heavily on just two things. Diversify on business so that you have other factors to depend upon. So that if these factors go out of
right.
hand, you have something to fall back on.
Exactly.
So I think now conclusion can be made. So I start with Prateek. Prateek, conclude first, and I am coming to each one of you for conclusion. So Prateek, please conclude.
Sir, we had a very fruitful discussion on the Sri Lankan crisis. We talked about the factors which were both political, economical, external, internal. So all these factors combined led to the crisis, and the major components of the crisis were specifically the economic mismanagement of the governments, the external loans of Sri Lanka, their political and social fault lines, and lastly, the Sri Lankan Sinhalese nationalism. So all these factors led to the crisis, and the measures that we have suggested are both long-term and short-term. In short-term, we have suggested a debt restructuring program, a bailout package from IMF, and at the same time, what we are suggesting is, in the long term, they need to, as rightly pointed out by Nalendra, they need to diversify their exports, and at the same time, what they need to do is they need to become more competitive in the exports, tea as well as clothes, and in the tourism sector, in which they are already very, very strong. India as a neighbor country can help them tide over this crisis. So all these factors together, Sri Lanka can tide over the crisis. But however, it needs to be handled with a very, very firm hand, because the crisis can digress into a very big, it is already a very big crisis, but it can become such a crisis of such potential that it may never be overcome.
Okay. Okay, now Nilendra.
Okay, thank you, sir, for allowing me to conclude. I think we had a very good discussion and there were some points on which we reached consensus. First of all, in the process of identifying the causes, a friend of us told about the history that Sri Lanka had already taken a huge amount of loan and debts from other countries. And then it again took debts from Sri Lanka, which increased its debt and made the economic crisis worse. The second factor was policies that were taken by the government. There were many policies, populist policies like reducing the taxes and many policies to lure the people. So I think that can be the second reason which led to the crisis. And the third reason that was identified was the Chinese debt trap policy, due to which Sri Lanka took lots of money from China and invested in the projects which didn't give returns. As a part of solution, we identified that since China has moved out of Sri Lanka, so it has created an opportunity for India to help. India is also helping by refueling the Chinese spacecraft, the Sri Lankan spacecraft, through HPCL and sending oil to IOCL Lanka petrol pumps. The other solution can be the formation of government and the entire restructuring of the economic framework of Sri Lanka. Then they can revive agriculture, because a large part of their GDP depends on that, so that slowly it can come out of the crisis. And in the last, as a long-term measure, they can diversify their economy so that they do not have only few factors to depend upon. Thank you.
Okay, Saurabh.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for allowing me to conclude. As very well said by Pratik and Nilendra, they have already very well explained the conclusion. I instead of repeating all those points, I would like to add my points that what are the lessons we can, as a country, what are the lessons we can learn from Sri Lankan crisis? So first of all, we have to learn that communal segregation can never lead to economic prosperity. It will be always threat for the economy and peace of the nation. And it is very evident from the fact that there was communal segregation in past 50 to 60 years in Sri Lanka, and that led to this crisis. The second very huge point we can learn from this is whenever there is a concentrated power in few hands, be it in company, be it in a country, this will most probably lead to a disaster and not prosperity. And the last but not the least point we have to learn from this is we have to choose our partners and investors very, very carefully, as Sri Lanka did not, because it relied on China's neo-colonialism, as geopolitical strategists call that. And it relied on China very highly. So yeah, that led to a very, very huge crisis in the country. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Bhupender.
Yeah, hello friends. I'm glad to conclude the discussion. We had a quite good discussion, and we discussed that how the Sri Lanka got into this economic crisis, starting from the political what was there, that how they structured the economy at the first place. They took huge loans, huge debts from other countries, and then later they were not able to repay them. Plus their foreign reserves were getting vanished slowly. Then we discussed that how the fuel prices increased and the inflation increased, and it led to the economic crisis again, back in the loop. And how the mismanagement of the government, the decisions which were taken again and again wrong, and they also led to the economic crisis of Sri Lanka. And after that we discussed, and we came up with that solutions how Sri Lanka can overcome from this is that one is that it can seek help from the other countries like India and some of the other countries, banks like IMF. It can get money and loans so that it can improve its infrastructure and grow back. And the other thing is it needs to what it used to depend, like agriculture and tourism, it needs to revive them. And other suggested by one of my friend is that they must diversify their economy, that what it is based on. So that was all which was discussed. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have discussed this topic now. So as I was discussing with you, this is very important topic. So Sri Lankan crisis, and the topic is very generic. You can think it off in any direction. So whenever a topic is given to you, which is very generic, it is all open to you in whichever direction you can take it. So the best would have been like, friends, the topic given for us today is a Sri Lankan crisis, and the crisis in Sri Lanka now has become a humanitarian crisis after the president of that island country has fled the nation. So now there is a lawlessness in the country, and the basic amenities people are not even getting. So there is a shortage of food, there is a shortage of medicine, there is a shortage of fuels. So country is in total chaos. So friends, this topic is a very generic topic for us to discuss. So I think we should discuss this topic in the categories of why this situation has come, number one. Number two, now how to overcome this problem, whatever problem is there, how to overcome, what can be the probable solution. Number three, the role played by India and opportunities available to country like India, and who are the other stakeholders to bring this nation out of trouble, like world organizations, United Nations organizations, or neighboring countries, or significant other nations. So who will come forward to bring this country out of the chaos? So that is another thing we should discuss in. Now I open the house for discussion among all of us. So this can be the introduction. Now why this problem has come. So like Pratik, Nalendra, you people have given some kind of classifications. And Nalendra said the causes can be internal or external. Internal causes can be, you can always talk about the dynastic rule of one particular family, and for the last 10 years in the their desire to bring good quality of life to the people, and overspending than what was permitted financially. It was not prudent, so they have spent a lot of money by borrowing it. So whenever you try to increase the quality of life of people by borrowing the money, it is not sustainable thing. It is never a good thing. It is like borrowing the money from neighbor and purchasing a luxury car for you. Eventually, it is going to backfire. That is what has happened. So the country's quality of life of the people, per capita income of the people, that should be based upon the strong fundamentals, macroeconomic fundamentals. What is the GDP growth rate? What is the export and import? What is the kind of productivity we have? So it should be based upon that, rather than borrowing the money from some other countries. That is the first mistake. Second mistake is like, asking some nation to invest a lot and you get into debt trap. That is also not good. So that is what Sri Lankan have got a trouble actually in China. Third is, there's always a geopolitical stability. India is the nearest neighbor of Sri Lanka, and it has worked for Sri Lanka all these years. And we are culturally also similar. I mean, 25-27% of the population, which is Tamilians, they are Indian, cultural people. So Tamilian, we have Tamil people in India. So that affiliation was there, and they digressed from there. So they deviated from there, and they, in the their own interest, they thought to go in the fold of China, and China eventually led them as a part of their own strategy of this entire necklace and this entire debt trap nation. So that is another mistake which they did. That is how it has gone. So there are social reasons, political reasons, and wrong economic financial policies of the government which brought Sri Lanka to this situation. And then there were some external reasons also, like COVID situation. Largely Sri Lanka is a the source of income is through the tourism, but 2019 onward we see that there are some troubles. COVID is one of the troubles, and then after that Russia-Ukraine war, and Russian also visit Sri Lanka a lot as a tourist. So that also is one of the reasons that Russian Ukraine people could not come, and oil market also had a big impact on Sri Lanka. So these were the reasons which played a role on this. So leadership which was not visionary, and then overspending, and then getting into some fold of countries like China, and then external impact which killed the tourism. These are a couple of reasons why this all happened. So why this happened? This is the case. Now, what can be done? There can be three players now. One is Sri Lankan leaders within Sri Lanka. Second can be nearest neighbors who have big impact on the development of that nation, like India. And third can be other organizations like United Nations organizations or other neighboring countries which are ready to help out Sri Lanka. So these are the three stakeholders: Sri Lanka itself, and then India, and then rest of the world. That is how they can, contribute. So every country can come forward and give their own way, can help in its own way. Like India has access of food grain, so India can give the food grains. India can help them in other ways. United Nations can also help in their own way. Some other countries can also come forward. China should come forward. So these are the what can be done, and that should be in the short term and long term perspective. Short term is like there should not be dearth of medicine. There should not be dearth of fuel. There should not be dearth of clothes or light or these kind of basic amenities. That is short term. And short term ke liye, there's some administrative structure should be created within Sri Lanka itself. Now, president is not there, but some administrative structure should be there, which takes care of all these things. The foreign aid, when as and when it comes, it should be properly distributed. That is short term what they have to do. Long term, they have to put their economy back on the platform. So it is to be taken, decisions to be taken. Again, the leadership has to be there. So that also is another thing. So for that, global organizations and United Nations is meant for that particular purpose. Actually, this is the role why United Nations was created in 1945. This is one of the reasons. So yes, we have to play the crucial role now for putting Sri Lankan economy back on the this particular thing and bringing peace to that particular island nation. That is how it has to be. Now, what is the role of India and what is the opportunity for India? That is also one of the ways. So we have seen that the Sri Lankans have gone deviated from their historical past, their good relations with India. And India is a country which has fought with LTT also and tried to help Sri Lankan when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi was Prime Minister. And we lost one of our Prime Minister in the process for helping Sri Lankans and fighting against the LTTs. So now it is the time that India should regain its lost geopolitical position there in Sri Lanka, and we should talk about Sri Lankans as Tamilians in Sri Lanka. So that is 25% of the population of 2 crore is almost 50 lakh are Tamilians. So 50 lakh Tamilians is a big number for India. So India has to intervene. And Sinhalese are there, Sri Lankans are there, and India has always said that okay, they should be given the due to this Tamilians should be given their own due in that particular nation. So this may be the another opportunity in which we can do that. And yes, India historically has helped all these neighbors, so India will come forward. India should come forward in that. And the influence of China should be reduced. So this is a typical example where other countries like Nepal and other countries like Maldives, Nepal, and whatever countries in the neighborhood are thinking of China model, they should try to understand now that it is not going to work for them. So that is another thing which we have to do. So yes, I think these are some of the things in which we have to discuss this entire topic. तो ये हुआ क्यों, इसका solution क्या है और इंडिया क्या कर सकता है, तीन डायरेक्शन में इसका डिस्कशन हम कर सकते थे. प्रतीक ने अच्छा बोला है, प्रतीक ने क्लासिफिकेशन किया कि क्या रीजन है, चैलेंजेस क्या है, अपॉर्चुनिटीज इंडिया को क्या है, रेमेडीज क्या हो सकती हैं, उसी लाइन पे. नीलेंद्र ने अच्छा बोला, नीलेंद्र ने कॉजेस को डिस्कस किया, सोल्यूशन क्या हो सकता है, क्या लेसन हम लर्न करते हैं. सौरभ और भूपेंद्र ने क्लासिफिकेशन उस तरीके से नहीं किया था. तो क्लासिफिकेशन इज समथिंग व्हिच इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सौरभ, you started with a historical background, लेकिन sometime you have to stick around the topic actually. So whatever you say, try to say that in categories, try to speak those things in some particular classifications, so that entire thing becomes very, very obvious that okay, I'm going to talk in this particular discussion. At introduction mein, you have to give that direction to the discussion instead of start a discussion directly. You are not to do that in the introduction. In the introduction, you have to give the direction to the discussion instead of starting discussion directly. Give the direction to the discussion in the introduction. Sort of. And Bhupender, you also, I think your connectivity was problem today. So, but you people are to do that. So I think today Prateek and Nalindra has spoken well, followed by Bhupender and then Saurabh. So Saurabh is to speak more in the body part also. In the introduction, you have to follow the structure. In the conclusion also, whenever I give you a chance for introduction and conclusion, don't assume that somebody has already spoken before you. Don't assume that. Just imagine that you are only going to speak, because in actual situation, only one fellow will introduce and conclude. So you speak in such a way that you are the only person who has got the chance to conclude and introduce. That is how you have to speak. Right? So all from my
Yes.
side, you have to ask for that.
Yes, sir. एक क्वेश्चन तो पहला तो ये है कि लाइक व्हेन प्रतीक स्पीक्स, तो वो सर कुछ ऐसे बोलता है कि एक वो नहीं होता है कि मतलब हाई एंड क्लास जो होती है, तो थोड़ा सा जो खुद का फ्लो होता है, खुद के अच्छे पॉइंट्स होते हैं, वो एग्जीक्यूट ही नहीं हो पाते हैं। क्योंकि जैसे आपने सुना होगा, तो व्हेन प्रतीक स्टार्ट स्पीकिंग, तो वो खुद से पहले पॉइंट बोल देता है कि पॉइंट 4, तो वो फिर 4 पॉइंट नहीं बोले, बीच में अगर हम कट कर देंगे तो हमारा पॉइंट कट जाएगा, तो वो तब तक
पर
बोल
आप
जाता
ये
है।
मान के
प्लस
चलो कि एक कैंडिडेट बहुत ज्यादा नहीं बोल सकता है। अगर वो बोलेगा तो ही इज एट रिस्क ऑफ लूजिंग मार्क्स। तो एक कैंडिडेट किसी भी जीडी में बहुत लंबा नहीं बोल सकता है, और अगर वो बोल रहा है तो उस रिस्क होता है। तो आपको चांस हमेशा मिलेगा बोलने का। वो नहीं होगा कि कोई अच्छा बोल रहा है तो आपका चांस कट रहा है, ऐसा होता है।
प्लस सर कि जैसे मतलब मेरे को लगा प्रतीक बहुत अच्छा बोलता है, तो समवट लाइक इंग्लिश में उसके बहुत अच्छी है। थोड़ा सा फिर खुद को ऐसा लगता है उस टाइम, लाइक स्टार्टिंग में जैसे ये बोलना स्टार्ट करता है, ऐसा लगता है कि मेरे को कुछ नहीं आता। तो वो कैसे, लाइक कि पता होता है कि हाँ मेरे को क्या क्या पॉइंट्स बोलने हैं, बट फिर एक तो इंग्लिश सुनते ही मेरे लाइक आई कुड नॉट कंप्रहेंड कि हाँ मेरे पास नॉर्मल इंग्लिश के वर्ड्स होते हैं, बट ही यूजेस दिस लाइक एट मतलब जो वोकैबुलरी डिफरेंट होती है, तो वो कैसे लाइक मैनेज करना है?
देखो, आप हिंदी में यूज करो, हिंदी में बोलो, कन्विंस करवाओ। वो टेक्निकल वो जार्गन यूज करता है, वो लॉयर है तो उनको जार्गन्स आते हैं। वो
ओके, हाँ
उसने यूज किया। लॉयर का तो काम ही बोलना है यार, लॉयर नहीं बोलेगा तो
एग्जैक्टली वही मैं तभी सोच रहा था कि वो लॉ लिखा है ना, तो इसीलिए
तो
ही इज
लॉयर
लाइक
तो बोलते ही हैं, तो उनको तो अच्छा बोलना होता है, उनका रोजी रोटी उससे चलती है। तो लेट हिम स्पीक, ही इज स्पीकिंग गुड, दैट इज देयर।
यस
बट
सर,
एट द
हाँ
सेम टाइम आई थिंक भूपेंद्र, यू शुड प्ले ऑन योर स्ट्रेंथ्स।
हम्म
इफ यू आर नॉट नोइंग द jargons, एटलीस्ट यू लॉजिकली स्पीक, और हिंदी में बात करो। अगर आपकी हिंदी अच्छी है तो हिंदी में बात करो, और कोई ऐसा सटीक सा पॉइंट लेके आओ जो पॉइंट कन्विंसिंग हो, चाहे उसमें नॉलेज
Yes,
ना
sir.
हो, चाहे उसमें कंटेंट ना हो, चाहे उसके अंदर
Okay,
इंफॉर्मेशन
okay.
ना हो, इंफॉर्मेशन लोडेड ना हो वो,
हम्म
लेकिन पॉइंट बहुत अच्छा हो। जैसे अगर सपोज तुम यही बोल दो कि ओके प्रतीक, आपने बहुत अच्छा बताए हैं पॉइंट्स, लेकिन मैं आपका ध्यान एक और पॉइंट की तरफ लाना चाहता हूँ कि इंडिया का को बहुत अच्छी अपॉर्चुनिटी है इस टाइम पे अपना नाम उस रीजन में करने के लिए, क्योंकि हम देखते थे कि चाइना का इन्फ्लुएंस में श्रीलंका है, तो इंडिया का इन्फ्लुएंस थोड़ा सा कम था। तो आपका क्या मानना है प्रतीक इस बारे में कि इंडिया का इन्फ्लुएंस क्या होना चाहिए? तो ऐसा बोलो आप कुछ, मतलब
Yes.
आपको किसी को आपको पार्टिसिपेट करने के लिए, डिस्कशन के लिए कोई बहुत ज्यादा नॉलेज नहीं चाहिए होता। जो अच्छे स्पीक करने वाले हैं, जो अच्छा पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं डिस्कशन में लोग, ऐसा नहीं होता कि उनको नॉलेज होता है। किसी को नॉलेज नहीं है तब भी वो बेस्ट स्पीकर हो सकता है, इवन बाय आस्किंग क्वेश्चंस। अच्छे स्पीकर होते हैं वो अटेंटिव भी होते हैं, बड़े कान लगा के बात सुनते हैं दूसरे की, और अगर कोई दूसरा अच्छी बात कर रहा है तो उससे क्वेश्चन भी उतना ही अच्छा पूछते हैं, और जब तुमने अच्छा क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया तो तुम्हें नंबर मिल जाएंगे। अब ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी उसकी है कि वो उसका आंसर करे, लेकिन तुम्हारी जो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है तुम क्वेश्चन पूछो, वो तुमने पूछ लिया।
Yes, sir.
तो आप पूरा बात ध्यान से सुनो और एक बहुत अच्छे तरीके से एक पॉइंट लेके आओ और उसको हिंदी में बोल दो।
ओके सर, बस
तो आपका
वही
काम
था कि थोड़ा सा डर होता है कि जब बहुत ही अच्छा बोल रहा होता है कोई, तो
नहीं,
ऐसा लगता है
ये
कि
तुम्हारा डर है ना, तुम्हें
इन्फीरियरिटी वाला।
तो
हाँ,
तुम्हारा ये अपना डर है, अदरवाइज ऐसा कोई डरने वाली बात नहीं है। कोई
ओके
अच्छा
सर।
बोल रहा है तो उससे तुम्हारे नंबर कभी नहीं कटेंगे, उसके नंबर बढ़ेंगे वो बात अलग है, तुम्हारे नंबर कम हो जाएंगे, ऐसा नहीं होता।
ओके सर।
और दूसरी बात ये है कि जीडी के दो पर्पस होते हैं, जीडी जीटी के। एक तो हमें पास होना होता है, दैट इज नंबर 1। 3-4 नंबर तो चाहिए, 10 नंबर में से 4 नंबर तो चाहिए। उसके बाद 5 नंबर आए, 6 नंबर आए, 7 नंबर आए, वो अलग बात है, लेकिन हम एलिमिनेट ना हो। पहले तो हमें ट्राई करनी कि एलिमिनेशन से प्रिवेंट करें अपने आप को, उसके बाद ट्राई करना है जितना ज्यादा स्कोर कर सकते हैं उतना ज्यादा स्कोर करें, वो चीज।
सर जैसे इंटरव्यू में तो पैनल मेंबर्स ही कभी हिंदी में सवाल पूछ लेते हैं, जीडी में मतलब मेंबर्स ऐसे इंग्लिश में बोल रहे हैं अगर,
नहीं, आप हिंदी इंग्लिश
हिंदी
दोनों
में
का
हम स्टार्ट
कॉम्बिनेशन में
कर
बात कर
सकते हैं
सकते
ऐसे ही
हैं,
या फिर?
बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं। हिंदी और इंग्लिश दोनों में से किसी में भी बोल सकते हैं आप, कोई ट्रबल नहीं है। हुआ है पिछले पिछले साल भी ऐसे ही हुआ है और कोई ट्रबल नहीं है उसमें।
उसमें डजंट मैटर ना कि सर बाकी मेंबर्स किसमें बोल रहे हैं ऐसा।
होता है उसका इम्पैक्ट, लेकिन अगर आपको आती ही हिंदी कंफर्टेबल है तो आप हिंदी में बोलिए, कोई ट्रबल नहीं। कोई इशू नहीं आता उसमें। होते हैं बच्चे जो समझते हैं, हिंदी भी समझते हैं, इंग्लिश में समझते हैं, और आप जिसमें कॉन्फिडेंट हैं, आप जिसमें कंफर्टेबल हैं, आप उसमें बात करें, मेरे को ही लगता है।
और सर इंट्रोडक्शन और कंक्लूजन वाला जो पॉइंट था उसमें मतलब कौन देगा वो डिसाइड कौन करता है?
वो आपको खुद ही बाउंस करना पड़ता है,
इंट्रो और
खुद ही कूदना पड़ता है,
ओके
खुद आपको एंटर करना पड़ता है। वो बोलेंगे ओके प्लीज स्टार्ट, तो जो सबसे पहले बोल देगा वो स्टार्ट कर देगा।
ओके जो मतलब वो लोग नहीं बोलते हैं कि आप इंट्रो ऐसे कुछ करिए?
नहीं।
ठीक है सर।
राइट, so then I think we keep practicing it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.